Thank you very much, Charlotte. Charlotte chose an unconventional way of doing things today, but it was very refreshing, and I think we've all enjoyed that, and we've all learnt from that, and Charlotte will have learnt from that too, as to how successful she thinks she was in running today's session. She's very successful, and she took a risk, the sorts of things that Ben mentioned, but it worked out really well. We didn't have an agenda. I didn't see, well, I had an agenda, but I didn't see anybody else with an agenda in front of them. Do you have a look at the agenda beforehand, or do you just roll up?
I normally have a look on the email that Ben.
So you know who's going to be speaking.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, okay. But sometimes people come along with an agenda, and then we expect the chairperson to follow through with that. So Charlotte started off quite differently from that. She didn't talk about the agenda. She didn't indicate what was coming up first. She went straight into this land holds memories. And I thought, well, what a beautiful way to start. It was one of the surprise openings that Ben talked about. And it's an emotional one as well. And it really stopped everybody dead in their tracks. And then you had the opportunity to continue with that, and you turned it into the acknowledgement of country. And you did it so beautifully. We didn't have to look on the agenda to see where it was and why it was being done. And then a little later on, your warm, friendly manner worked really well, and touches of humour as well, and the enthusiasm. And then the way in which we were looking to engage with Ben, and to think about how we felt towards Ben at the start. Unusual, but I thought it was a nice way of doing it, and I thought it worked well. You might not get away with it in a conference so much, but I think in some circumstances it worked really well. At the end, you did say, to finally introduce Ben, you said, make some noise for Ben. Now,
Again.
I know that there are compares of reality shows and other things that like to use those sorts of phrases. I'm not sure that that's quite what we want to do for a scientific one, but you gave it a try, and it worked all right. We gave him a good, generous round of applause, but you may want to think of how you would do it you need to know your audience to be able to do that and do it well. But I love the way in which you're sharing today, and you did it so well, and you thought about it beforehand, you were well prepared, and you were able to really build all of the speakers up at the start, and to thank all the speakers again at the end. Ben's presentation today is one of the most important presentations that you'll hear from him, because unless you get off to a good start in those first 30 seconds of your presentations, it's irretrievable. And so nailing those first 30 seconds, and Ben really emphasised the importance of that, is just so important. And it's whether your audience is just going to go off to sleep again, or whether they're going to sit bolt upright and wonder what is coming next. It's just so important. And I like the way in which Ben has illustrated that today too. He had multiple starts and he took the time just to pause, and then the next start, off, another start. And it was just a way of being able to illustrate that well, and I think we all got that message loud and clear. I think the speaker confidence bit is important, and we notice that because that also means that if the speaker is confident, the audience has confidence in the speaker, and I think that's also really important as well, because you may not have the opportunity to build that rapport beforehand, or to explain, or the chairperson may not have explained why you're the right person to be doing a presentation. So with the 3 styles of hooks and the 6 types of hooks, we've got something like 18 opportunities now, combinations of over more, to look at ways in which we might do it. Ben's thrown out the challenge for your next presentation. I might even get you to reflect on your last presentation that you did. And did you use one of these hooks, or did you use a fairly standard opening that you think other people might come to expect? Have a look, or go back to that and say, well, how might I have done that in a different way, using one of the techniques that Ben's illustrated? I just can't emphasise enough the importance of hooks. It really does make a huge difference. We had 2 speakers today, two delightful speakers, and Peiyao gave hers. And Peiyao came out here and unashamedly read what she was wanting to say today, but that belied the preparation that she'd done beforehand. She knew exactly what she wanted to say and had a really good message for all of us relating to the topic that had been set for you. You came out, you stood very, very still, very erect, very confident, and even though the notes were a little bit large, you were able to read that, and we got the message very well. I'm sure that in future you'll need to rely on that much less. You spoke very, very clearly, and you didn't stumble at all over any of the words. And I suspect that with a little bit more practice and confidence, you'll be able to reduce the size of those notes down to just a few cue cards and things like that, because here's the next part of the story, the next paragraph of your story, and you'll be able to deliver that just as well. And you'll be able to have more eye contact with the audience, more opportunity for gesture, and that will add to the presentation as well. But you certainly got our attention when standing very still. We listened very, very carefully. So I thought you did a really great job, and you had a good finish to it. You had a great opening. Although you did repeat the topic, if you can avoid repeating the topic and use one of these books that Ben talked about today, and at the end round off, as you did very well, you said, transform the world to a better place. So it was a nice way to round it off and finish that these small things are really, really important. So well done today. And Hsiao-Chi, I'm not sure, I apologise if I haven't. You come on here, you're a great smile, you are very confident and spoke very, very clearly, and you knew your material extremely well and knew that you had something important to present. And I was ticking off lots of different things here, all the bits of information that you shared with us today that you developed and elaborated on in your PhD that are now part of these two useful tools, maybe even more, that other people can now use. And so it was you knew what the audience was, you knew that you had something important today, you had a really strong purpose in delivering that, not just to talk about the trials and tribulations of your PhD, but you talked about the outcomes from it and the impact that it's likely to have. So I thought that you did that really well. You had some issues with the formatting, and so that's one of the things you sometimes do need to check beforehand. And I'm not sure the best technique to do that, to make sure it is. Sometimes it's things like embedding fonts and other little techniques that you can use to make sure that it doesn't appear on the screen as well. But give it a try out with a real system if you do. I did notice that some of your tables, you had a brick wall for some of the tables, and I think that made it harder to see what was inside those cells. So I'd lighten the boundaries of that up, but still make sure that they're all quite clear and distinct. Summing up was good. I think you could probably have done a little more to convince everybody around here that maybe this was something for them, and give some illustrations of the examples where they might be able to use these tools that you've developed, so that you do get people wanting to have a coffee with you and find out a little bit more about that, because I'm sure lots of people here are dealing with data where it's confounded by other things which are extraneous to it and they'd like to remove, and having a biostatistician to help them with that would be really, really valuable. So I think you've probably got some new friends in Cambridge today. I hope you enjoy coffee. The end of your talk, two things there. The acknowledgements did take up quite a bit of time and space, and it meant that we started to forget about the really important things you talked about and what you'd achieved. So if you can turn some of that round the other way and say right at the outset, this was the fantastic team I was working with, this is where we got our sponsorship from, and try to cut it down a little bit if you can, so there's not quite so much information on there. And then that gives you the rest of the time is clear space in which you can talk about what you've achieved with the team, and then the benefit it's going to deliver for the audience and for people beyond the audience, people, the patients that you may be working with as well. Leave it for someone else to talk about the question time, and I think if you can finish with a really big summary and a clear summary, that lets it hang in the air and people will understand that, and you'll immediately get it across, rather than having to tell people, I've finished, I'll take some questions, and leave that for Charlotte to do. But a really good presentation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I think you've done some great work within that PhD, and I'm sure other people here would understand that as well. So another great session today. A really important one. There's going to be a follow-up to that with how to finish some of your presentations as well. But that's what these sessions are all about. I also like the way in which people will take risks. Everyone was taking risks in here today when coming up with the vocalizations and things like that. It gives you permission to do that. You see how it works, and if it works well, put it away and use it again. If it doesn't work, well, forget about that one and try it again. So a really great session, and I encourage you to keep on coming to these for the remainder of